In 1976, the Republican Party wrote its first platform of the Roe era, stating that the party, quote, supports the efforts of those who seek enactment of a constitutional amendment to restore protection of the right to life for unborn children, end quote. Now, since then, the Republican Party platform has consistently affirmed the unborn child's fundamental individual right to life, calling for a constitutional amendment, calling for recognition of the 14th Amendment personhood of the unborn. So as another presidential election approaches, and with it the drafting of another party platform, what will Republicans do in this post-Roe world, and why does it matter? Joining me now to discuss this is Chuck Donovan. He's a strategic advisor and founder of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, formerly Executive Vice President here at the Family Research Council. And prior to that, he was actually in the Reagan administration as a senior writer. Chuck Donovan, welcome back to Washington Watch.
My honor to be with you, Tony. Thank you.
So the Republican Party began, going all the way back, I know you weren't there then, but it began as a response to the evils of slavery. So how should this legacy inform the battle to protect the unborn?
Well, it's fascinating because the Republican Party, and it's one of the reasons I was drawn to political life, certainly the major reason was the life issue. But the Republican Party had a legacy, as you noted, with respect to slavery. And interestingly enough, in 1856, when it first engaged the issue, it engaged it along with defense of marriage. Oddly enough, the object of concern then was polygamy. There was religious conflict over that. Slavery was an issue because of the territories. The existing parties of the day wanted to preserve the option to enslave African Americans in the United States. And the Republican Party said no. And this principle was the first principle that formed this party. And it did have the effect of pulling the country in different directions. But it also had a political effect. The author of the original pro-marriage and anti-slavery platform in the Republican Party was David Wilmot, a Democrat of Pennsylvania. He spoke at both the 56 convention and the 60 convention, and he migrated to what was then needed to be a new party that would take this stance that slavery was wrong everywhere, and that marriage needed to be man and woman, single individuals everywhere.
So the more things change, the more they are the same. I mean, we're fighting very similar issues today as when the party started. But I want to go to something that you said at the outset. Your reason for being involved. You are what we would describe here as a sage-con, a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, like me. I don't like politics, would have never chosen this arena, but my faith compelled me to engage. And just as you were compelled on the life issue, so was I to enter back in the early 90s. But the Republican Party has become the party of life. And this is one of those areas of clear contrast between the Republican and Democratic parties, with the Democratic Party becoming, literally abortion until the moment of birth at taxpayer funding. Let's talk a little bit about the history of how the Republican Party has become the party of life and why it matters. Take us back to the start.
Well, if you want to go back to the start, of course, it predates Roe v. Wade. It goes back into the 1960s when a number of states first liberalized their abortion laws. And as facts would have it, the Republican Party played a major role in that. Nelson Rockefeller, a governor of New York, vetoed a successful effort. Now, most people don't remember this, but in 1972, I think disgusted by what the illegalization of abortion had meant to New York City and other havens for the practice, the New York legislature repealed its pro-abortion to 20 weeks law. Governor Nelson Rockefeller vetoed it. When you got to President Nixon, He convened, supervised indirectly, the Rockefeller Commission on Population Growth and the American Future. This body was bipartisan but heavily Republican. It recommended repealing the nation's abortion laws. And you got soon thereafter to 1973, and there were many Republican appointed justices on that Roe court, but they imposed abortion on demand on the country. And somehow, Tony, I love this, where people say they're defending democracy. Well, from 1789, when we had a constitution, to 1973, it somehow eluded the notice of Jefferson, of Madison, of Lincoln, even Roosevelt, that there was a right to abortion on demand. That's what that Constitution meant. And slowly our nation recovered its sense of the Declaration of Independence, which states categorically, as Republican platforms going into the future would repeat, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And the first of these, and I think the prime of these, is the right to life. So that's what drew me into political life. It's what keeps me here, because now we have a chance, post the Dobbs decision, to protect the unborn. But I have to tell you, Tony, we're not going to get there by retreat. The Republican Party, if it abandons almost 50 years of pro-life commitment, I think it's dooming the nation in some ways. It's certainly dooming itself.
Now, let me play the devil's advocate here, and I'm not too good
Sure.
at playing the devil, but let me try for a moment. So the others are saying, well, we're not abandoning it. We just, post-Roe, what Dobbs gave was the right for states to address this. It's a state issue. Address that.
Well, it's basically the same argument that the party had with the nation in 1856 over slavery and polygamy. And we will end up, if we take that course, it requires us to do a whole host of things we need to think about. First of all, we have a bundle of federal legislation in existence that protects and names the unborn child. We have the Unborn Victims of Violence Act that protects unborn children from being attacked by anyone but the mother, in other words, by assault or what have you. We have the Child Health Insurance Program, which specifically says the states may design programs that properly, and I say very properly, treat the unborn child as a beneficiary of those programs, not a target. We have the Medicaid program. Whatever you think of it, it's a federal-state partnership. And as of today, 42% of the births in the United States are to Medicaid eligible mothers. So it matters supremely whether the baby is a beneficiary of that program or a target of it. On top of that, there are jurisdictions, the military. That's federal jurisdiction. What do we do in military hospitals? We have the VA now being pushed by Joe Biden to provide abortion or refer for abortion. You have the District of Columbia, which allows abortions up till birth. We currently have a case of 5 babies who were found, one of whom or more may have been victims of a partial birth abortion. Congress can deal with that. And if Congress doesn't deal with it, then right there in our nation's capital, a few blocks from the halls that honor Jefferson and Lincoln, we will have babies near term being killed. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, Chuck Donovan, I mean, I understand that there are things that we can accomplish at the state level. Having been a state legislator, I was able to do things in the legislature in Louisiana. Now my state of Louisiana is doing a lot more than what can be done at the national level. But that doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean, I mean, if there is a moral absolute, as laid out, as you made reference to the Declaration, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life. If that's an absolute, it doesn't stop at the state line. This is something that is not limited to a zip code. This is something that is universal.
Well, I feel very strongly about that. I know you do as well. As a father, you realize that under the legal regime being posited by the abortion industry, someone in a state in which you don't live, you may not have abortion permissible in your state, but they can now, thanks to our Food and Drug Administration, they can mail your 13-year-old daughter abortion pills. She didn't even have to be pregnant. They can send them along and encourage her to use them if she needs them. They can encourage minors to be brought across state lines. They oppose limits that respect the rights of parents. So it matters to Rhode Island what happens in New York State. It matters to Texas what's permitted in Kansas. And essentially, it comes back, though, to the question, is the protection of life a universal principle? And what happens when we walk away from that and expect good news to follow? I think it may be the most important policy determination of this year or many years to come, whether the GOP stands fast.
So let's talk about that for just a moment in terms of we don't make our decisions based on politics here. We make our decisions based upon truth, moral absolutes. All life is created in the image of God, therefore worthy to be protected, welcomed into our world. What does this do for let's say the Republicans go down this path of watering it down, trying to weaken that plank of life? What does it do politically for all those individuals like you, like me, who've entered this arena based upon this set of issues that the party has championed?
Well, Tony, I think it'll have a devastating impact. I came to Washington in 1978 as a part-time lobbyist for National Right to Life Committee. And I learned very quickly that when you go on Capitol Hill at that time, there about the same number of Democrats were pro-life as Republicans. And what's really happened here is not so much that the Republican Party singled itself out. It's that a decision was made on a matter of principle, and many, many good Democrats who may not otherwise be attracted on issues of defense or taxation migrated to the GOP because they could be heard there. And just very recently, pro-life groups backed Dan Lipinski, the last remaining pro-life Democrat in the House, and he was primaried by his own party. That's tragic stuff to happen in the political world. And that, more than anything, I think is what is holding our cause back. It's the lack of consensus that certain issues transcend partisan politics.
Right.
And certainly for advocates like you and the Family Research Council, Susan B. Anthony, and certainly for me, we will back away from political engagement if our voices cannot be heard.
Now, and I want to be very clear for some people listening, this doesn't mean that we don't vote for a Republican, we vote for a Democrat. It means we vote for individuals who clearly or most clearly represent our values, but it's the issue of intensity and enthusiasm. It's do we talk about a particular party, a particular candidate? Do we work for them? Do we make phone calls? Do we tell our friends about them? Are we enthusiastic as Election Day approaches? Or do we just cast a vote because we know we got to vote for somebody when we vote for the lesser of two evils? I mean, that's a big difference when you go into an election.
I completely agree, Tony. Intensity is a huge thing. I think we all know, looking at poll after poll, they moved around a little bit, but everyone is saying there are 5 or 6 states where the election will be decided. That's a bit of a misnomer because it still matters wherever you vote, and certainly down the ballot. But if the difference between the candidates is 1 or 2 percentage points, enthusiasm is a difference maker. And I'll just note that going back a few decades, when Republican leaders like Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, who kept his promises on the issue, and George W. Bush ran for office, they embraced the right to life and they did well. Where the GOP has faltered at the national level is where it was perceived not to be enthusiastic. That's going to affect the psychology of every voter.
That's the final question I want to ask you that sets the stage for that in the last 30 seconds here, Chuck, is some have saying that, wow, the abortion issue in post-Roe world is a losing issue. It's a liability. Speak to that.
I think here and there we're going to have a loss. There's no denying the 7 ballot initiatives that didn't go our way. But the truth is we're playing a long game. The babies who are born because of what we do or don't do are our future. And I would say, don't get too far down, don't get too far up. It's a labor of love. Keep at it.
Right. And if you want to win, you got to talk about it. It has to emanate from the heart as to why we believe these things and the fact that we believe them no matter what occurs. Just like John Quincy Adams said, duty is ours, results belong to God. Chuck Donovan, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.